I believe in human possibility, human potential, and I think that one of our biggest limiting beliefs is the belief of how limited we really are. And so my interest is to give people the science to begin to understand how powerful they really are. And I think that science really is the language that does that really well. And the new sciences like quantum physics and neuroplasticity, neuroscience, neuroendocrinology, psychoneuroimmunology, the mind-body connection, epigenetics, all of those sciences point the finger at possibilities. So I want to create a language for people from a philosophical or theoretical standpoint for them to begin to understand what's possible. But then I want to be able to have those people begin to wire that information in their brain completely, because learning is making new connections, right, in the brain. But remembering is maintaining and sustaining those connections, and it's so much easier to lose our vision than to remember it, right? So then we have to begin to hardwire the brain or install the neurological hardware in preparation for an experience. So the more people understand what they're doing and why, then the how gets easier. So I want to then set up the conditions in an environment, in a workshop where people can begin to apply or personalize what they learn so that they can have an experience. An experience then further enriches the brain, but the prize of an experience is an emotion. And once you start feeling unlimited, once you start feeling abundant, once you start feeling worthy, now you're teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind has intellectually understood. So knowledge is for the mind and experience is for the body, and people begin to embody the truth of that philosophy. Now, if they can repeat it over and over again, it'll become innate in them. It'll become natural, second nature, it'll become easy. They'll begin to master that philosophy. So I want people to begin to understand that thoughts are very powerful. Feelings drive our thoughts, and that they can begin to create a better life for themselves once they understand some of these principles. And people use the word victim so much, and I don't really think we spend a lot of time really unraveling the idea. I'm really upset because of this person or this circumstance or this condition in my life. Then what we're saying, this is not conscious. This is an unconscious program. What we're saying is somebody out there is actually controlling the way I'm feeling and the way that I'm thinking. So if something out there is controlling your feelings and your thoughts, you're victim to whoever, whatever that is. Now, here's the challenge. The challenge is when things go really well, then you are feeling really good. But when things aren't going very well, then you're feeling pretty bad. So then the end result of that is that many people then become unconsciously reliant on something out there to change how they feel and hear. But if they don't understand that they're creating reality all the time, and they're living in lack, in unworthiness, in separation for their whole entire life, waiting for the event to happen to take away their lack or emptiness, well, they'll spend their whole entire life wishing, wanting, waiting, hoping. And so then that creates further separation from things changing. So then the idea then is to turn that battleship around. Is it possible then that the way you think and the way you feel can begin to produce effects in your outer world? Now, that isn't something that you swallow in one bite. It's a process of gaining knowledge. It's a process of practice. It's a process of experience. But once you start seeing those synchronicities, those coincidences, those opportunities that start to fall into place because you're experiencing change in your outer world, if you're doing the work, you're going to start paying attention to what you're doing inside of you that's producing the effect outside of you. And once you correlate the changes of what you're doing inside of you with the effect you produce outside of you, you're going to pay attention to what you did, and you're going to do it again. And all of a sudden, you're going to start believing more that you're the creator of your life and less of the victim of your life. So if your thoughts and feelings somehow have an effect on your outer world, and you're reacting to the same people at the same place at the same time in the same circumstances, then you're actually reaffirming the same reality because you're thinking equal to everything that you know. So that in order to change that, we have to begin to be greater than our environment. And being is how we think and feel. So when people begin to practice this, they're not so quick to give their power away to the person or condition in their life, because the stronger the emotion you feel from some problem or condition in your life, the more altered you feel inside of you, the more you pay attention to the cause. Well, where you place your attention is where you place your energy. So you're giving your life force, you're giving your energy away to that person or problem that you could be using to heal, that you could be using to create a new future. So then teaching people then how to self-regulate and find the present moment and settle their body down from those unconscious programs or those emotions that they're conditioned to. That's the work. And so then when you start lowering the volume to those emotions and you're doing the work and mastering yourself in some way, as you begin to change your emotional state, you're not going to be thinking about that person or problem, and you're going to begin to take your power back. And it literally begins to build a person's own electromagnetic field. Now, they have energy to heal. They have energy to create a new future. First of all, 15, 20 years ago, everybody wanted to stay in the philosophical realm. Nobody wanted to do anything with it. But this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how, because information is so available, right? I mean, you don't need a doctor, you don't need a priest, you don't need a rabbi, you don't need a governor, you don't need a teacher to gain information. You don't need an authority any longer. Because of technology, we have access to information. Well, information creates awareness. And awareness is consciousness. And you can't have consciousness without energy. So people are beginning to wake up with a greater level of awareness of what's possible. So 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, I walked out and there was always a little resistance. But now people are coming because they want to actually experience the truth of it. So that makes my job easier, because I can just walk out and just fire away, because people are prepared, they're informed, they're ready. So anything that's not consistent with that energy or that level of awareness, those paradigms are beginning to break down. Whether it's education, whether it's religion, whether it's politics, economics, the environment, the medical model, everything's collapsing because people are informed. So I love that idea, because when people show up and they say, well, listen, I understand that I have a health condition. I understand that it's taken me 10 years of being unhappy, 10 years of living in stress, 10 years of living in fear, that's actually begin to signal or select and instruct the gene that creates the disease. Well, it may take me some time then to unlearn that process, to break that conditioning process. So there's a practical understanding now. But something amazing has happened. I mean, we've spent over 10 years doing very advanced scientific studies. We've done over 8,500 brain scans. We've measured so many thousands of hearts, because if you're going to create a new future, it requires a clear intention and elevated emotion. Well, let's train our people how to create really, really high-level brain coherence and really, really, really self-regulating heart coherence. Why? Because if you're going to believe in that future that you're creating with all of your heart, it better be opened and activated, and you better know how to do that, and you better understand the science of what happens. We've measured gene regulation, 7,500 different gene regulations. We know you can change your gene expression in the person's telling their story, and it's not glamorous, and it's not a Hollywood version. This is real. They lost everything. They went bankrupt. They lost their friends. They lost certain things in their life, but they were persistent. And that person is the example of truth, and it's undeniable. Or the person who had a stroke and is blind. The doctor said your vision's going to get worse, and she has a transcendental moment and she can see again. Like, that doesn't happen a year later after you've had a stroke. And then, people having all of these transcendental changes that are going on. I think now that what's happening is I'm more surprised at this point than anybody, because I never thought how far this could go, right? So I'm super happy. I'm overjoyed with what's taking place, and I think we've kind of pierced that 4-minute mile. Like, once you break that veneer, right, in consciousness, then other people can do it. And I think there's strong footprints in consciousness in the quantum field. I think there's evidence in three-dimensional reality, and it's an important time for us to wake up. It's been said that you should meditate for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're really busy, then you should meditate for an hour a day. Information is what opens that door. I mean, if you think that your thoughts have something to do with your future, just from a theoretical standpoint, that your thoughts create your destiny, and you think 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day, and 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before, well, then your life isn't going to change very much as long as you're thinking the same way. And those same thoughts lead to the same choices. The same choices lead to the same behaviors. The same behaviors create the exact same experiences, and we anticipate the same feelings or emotions from those experiences, and those emotions are the payoff that drive our very same thoughts. Well, our biology, our neurocircuitry, our neurochemistry, our hormones, and even our gene expression will be equal to how we think, how we act, and how we feel. And how we think, how we act, and how we feel is called our personality. And our personality creates our personal reality. That's it. So the present personality who's listening to this show has created the present personal reality called their life. So if you can latch on to this idea, if you want to create a new life, a new personal reality, you got to change your personality, which means you better start thinking about what you've been thinking about and changing it. You begin to become conscious of your unconscious actions or habits or behaviors and modify them. And then we have to begin to look at the emotions that we live by every single day that keep us connected to the past and decide, do these emotions belong in our future? So most people are trying to create a new personal reality as the same personality, and it doesn't work. You literally have to become someone else. So the principle in neuroscience says that nerve cells that fire together wire together. You keep thinking the same way, making the same choices, demonstrating the same habits, creating the same experiences that stamp the same networks of neurons into the same patterns, all for the familiar feeling called you. And you do that for 10 years on end, you're going to begin to hardwire certain patterns in your brain that becomes your identity. And by the time we're 35 years old, it kind of becomes fixed, right? And psychology used to say that you can't change that, but we now know that you can. So then that kind of box in the brain, that is the habit of ourselves. It's we're 95% of the time running a series of programs. So then sitting and doing the work, we have to become disentangled from those programs. And so the moment you decide to do something differently or make a new choice, what most people don't want to face is that discomfort. And that discomfort, that uncertainty, that lack of predictability, that unknown is what people are afraid of, because they'd rather live in guilt. At least they can predict who they're going to be than take a chance in possibility. So when a person begins to understand this and you say, well, how long have you been this way? And they say, I've been like this for 35 years. And you say, why 35 years? Because 35 years ago, I had this one event. Well, the stronger the emotion you feel from the reaction from that event, the more altered you feel inside of you, the more the brain narrows its focus and freezes the image and takes a snapshot. And that's called a memory, right? So then forget the memory. just overcome the emotion, because it's the emotion that keeps you anchored to the past. So that sounds really good theoretically, but when you step out into that unknown, into that void, the body really is in a habit. And when a habit is when the body becomes the mind. Or if you're thinking about that past event and it's producing an emotion, well, you need an image and a feeling to start the conditioning process. So the body's either conditioned into the familiar past, or it's hardwired in the predictable future, because it wakes up every single day and runs through the same series of routine actions. So the present moment then becomes the unknown. When people start feeling that discomfort, Jay, they'd rather get on their cell phone and call someone, or get up and say, I can't meditate, or, I have too much to do. They excuse themselves. They return back into that familiar feeling, because the body's actually telling the brain. The habit is when the body becomes the mind. So the body's stepping out into the unknown and says, ooh, I'd rather feel guilty, I'd rather feel unhappy than be in this discomfort. So then, at least then, when they return back to that familiar feeling, then they feel safe. So they step out in the unknown, and the body starts influencing the mind, saying, you can start tomorrow, you're too busy, it's your mother's fault, it's your culture's fault, I don't have enough money, this isn't gonna work. Those are the programs in there that are standing in the way between you and your future. So then nerve cells that no longer fire together no longer wire together. So the act of observing those states of mind and body means you're no longer the program. You're the consciousness observing that program. So then to meditate, it means to become familiar with. So as you become familiar with those thoughts, you become conscious of how you speak, you become aware of how you act, you notice how you're feeling. The more conscious you become of those unconscious programs, the less unconscious you'll go in your waking day. Why? Because it's not enough to just have a great meditation and get up and get on the freeway and get in traffic and getting stressed. You just return back to the old self again. Our job then is to sustain that modified state of mind and body the entire day. And if you can, get ready, because something different or unusual is going to begin to happen in your life, and it will come as a coincidence or a synchronicity. And that's breadcrumbs from the divine saying, you're on the path, just keep doing it. There'll be another one, just keep staying in that energy. And so teaching people then to understand that there's a formula that we now know, that if you apply that formula, you'll begin to see those changes. And now, as people are doing it more and more effectively, the results are going up as well. We just had Bond University. They just took a whole bunch of my brain scans from 10 years ago. Huge clinical study, a lot of analysis, and they're blown away by the speed in which the community can change brain and heart coherence. They know how to do it. It's not something that's separate from them. They've practiced it enough times that they now know how to do it. So what's the significance of that? Well, really simple. In your life, if you start returning back to the same reactions, to the same people and circumstances, you're returning back to the old self. So you got to stay conscious in your life, and if you're not being defined by a vision of the future, then you're left with the memories of the past, and you will be predictable in your life. So crossing that river of change from the old self to the new self, there's a neurological, a biological, a chemical, a hormonal, a genetic death of the old self. But if you teach people there's something on the other side, they won't give up on themselves. They'll keep going. So there's enough evidence to encourage people. And you can't tell me you're too old to do this work. You can't tell me you're too sick to do this work. You can't tell me you had a turbulent past, or that you're too overweight or too underweight or too out of shape, or you can't even tell me that you've never meditated before. In fact, some of our greatest scans are people who just have never meditated before, that are not trying to do anything. They just follow instructions. So our community now is beginning to understand that it is possible, and they go all in, not 50% in, not 60% in. If we do a week-long event, we got 1,000 people or 1,500 people, and they are all in. And that when they start getting beyond themselves, that first day or second day, once they start getting beyond themselves and that magic starts to happen, then I have no idea, I can't predict